What up, everyone? Welcome to episode 55 of the Mutant XPerience podcast. With me today, very special episode. I believe for the first time ever, I have two brothers on my podcast. I have BlinG and BMxer from the Arizona Third Strike crew. And so, BlinG, BMxer, Dan, Roy, welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So I want to go ahead and just get this out of the way because for anyone who has had siblings before, you know where some energy happens, right? So I just want to just get this out of the way so that, people aren't just kind of anticipating when I'm going to ask questions about this, but like, who bodies who? Like, come on, like who BlinG versus BMxer, no BS, first and 10.
It depends on what era you're talking about. For the longest time, Roy would kick my ass at every game. I honestly didn't get to his level probably till like 2012, maybe 2013. So if you want to talk like back then, I almost never won. But now it depends on the day. Like some days, like I'll win the set like 10-7, and then there's some days where like I have a really bad fucking game, bad set, and he'll just whip my ass 10-5 or something like that. So it's never one-sided, to be honest.
Yeah, it all started, because obviously he I beat him in almost, every fighting game, that we picked up, back in the day, and this was obviously, I mean, he was in high school and I was just barely getting into college. I think as soon as he was introduced to Third Strike, and the way I did that was one day, and this was before I was getting home from school, I stopped by a Best Buy, picked up an Xbox, and it was 15th anniversary, with Third Strike and Hyper, and also an X arcade stick, the dual X arcade stick, back when we used back in the day when they still made those. So he started playing on that. And he had like this ghetto wireless setup that he used with the computer that he built all by himself.
Worst fucking stick ever, by the way. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, that stick was not good at all. But that's how I got him into it. He started playing Third Strike Online on the OG Xbox. And he right off the bat, he went down the same road that I did when I first started playing Third Strike. Alex was our day one main. I mean, believe it or not. It's just what came natural to us, at the time. Back when I started was back when the Dreamcast was all that we know as far as like console Third Strike, and it was the wrong version, mind you. But yeah. Alex was my day one main. Alex was his day one main. And honestly, I think he had a better start with him than I did, because he was wrecking all kinds of fools with that character, getting all kinds of he was using setups, that he found out on his own that I probably never would have would have thought of. But he just had a real passion, the same passion that I did when I first started back, in the mid 90s, as far as Street Fighter goes. So I guess you could say we had similar roots, growing up, as far as to like Street Fighter in general. But yeah, he's done pretty well. I mean, he won one of the Jazzy ranking events, and I had a really bounce back set against Big Game James. That was a really epic set. He had to reset it, and he won it 3-2 on the second set. Even the commentators were stunned. And James is no easy task, to get through. Absolutely love that guy. I love that he's an Arsene. He's made us a lot stronger. But that's how I got my little brother into it, and I'm really glad that I did. Because he's found a really he's been very passionate about Third Strike and at the same level that I have. When I first started playing it. So
before we talk about Street Fighter and Third Strike, I just wanted to ask you about video games and how you got into this stuff growing up.
Are we talking like arcade gaming? Because that's kind of like where, or actually, if you want to go back further, you got to go back to like 1988 when the NES was popular. That's obviously when video games in general. That's how I really got into it. Video games in general. It's the arcades that were in the malls, and also Peter Piper Pizza. I mean, because I was a kid back then, and you had your birthday parties there and all that stuff. And but back then, in our area, I don't know about everywhere else, but the place where we would have these birthday parties was called Pistol Pete's, and that place got bought out by Peter Piper, but back in those days when we were kids, those were the places that were like our go-to arcades. And back then they were usually really good about getting all the new stuff in. So there was no issues on that whatsoever. But yeah, those were really fun times. Video games in general is definitely arcade gaming and like the malls and the pizza joints, that type of thing. Oh, and don't forget about Circle K's and 7-Elevens.
So where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Gilbert, Arizona. I moved out to Gilbert when I was 7 years old. Back during those days, growing up in Gilbert, the only arcades where we would hit up, and Daniel remembers this too, was the Superstition Springs Mall that was further out in East Mesa. Back in those days, what we used to do was because my mom liked to go to the mall and shop, and we would get so bored walking around with her. So what she would do, she would give like all three of us, because I have two brothers. I got one other brother besides Daniel, but she would give us like $10 or $20 sometimes, and just let us go to the Pocket and Change arcade. And then we would just be pocketed. Our pockets were like full of like quarters, and we would end up, just chucking quarters, at these games that we like to play. And back in those days, the games that we would play would be like KI, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Tekken 2, like all those classics. Even Street Fighter 2 and X-Men versus Street Fighter, because I know they had those games in there. But yeah, but that's what we would do back then, back when we were kids. And at the time I was like 14, 15 years old. So I was the responsible brother, taking care of my younger two brothers, while we were in that arcade by ourselves. So,
because, back then, like head to head fighting games, like some of the times it would get crazy. Like some people want to fight you over losing, and, being like, at that time, like 7, 8 years old, there have been times where like some guys wanted to kick my ass because I was beating them at Tekken Tag or Tekken 3, whatever was, hot at that time. But yeah, he would take care of us for the most part. I mean, he would also whoop my ass in sets because he just had better knowledge of the game. I wouldn't say I was a button masher. I mean, I definitely knew how to play the game, but I didn't know like hit confirms or anything like that. I was just considered a casual player. But yeah, those times were really fun. I miss going to an arcade and seeing that arcade feeling. I mean, there's still some places left, but like the mall arcade was just like a different series of amazingness, I guess you can say.
That was one of the reasons why during season 3 we had to run an auto qualifier at Boss Battle Games in Indiana. Shout outs to the Indy crew. That was an arcade in a mall, and
yeah,
it's still there.
Yeah, the arcade is in the mall.
There's not too many of those left. That's for sure.
That's what I was thinking when I walked up there. All that nostalgia. I was like, wow.
We have one of those left at Arizona Mills, but I mean, it's a barcade pretty much. A lot of ticket redemption games. They have like the old school area upstairs with like the 90s and early 2000 games that they don't really maintain. They're all LCD cabinets now. But yeah, it's nothing like it was back in the early 90s, early 2000, or late 90s, early 2000s.
So I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, Dan. You were talking about your experiences in the arcade when you were young, and you were talking about how like there were times when you felt like maybe people wanted to fight because like there was this 8-year-old kid beating them in Tekken Tag. And so like, hold up, exactly what age did you start playing fighting games? Like when did you like, when's like your earliest recollection, not just of fighting games, but just video games?
No, we had the Nintendo, the original Nintendo with Contra. So that's probably like my earliest, play, I guess you could say. And that was probably like 94, 93 maybe. I mean, that's as far as I can remember. But as far as fighting game goes, Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo was probably the first fighting game I played.
So I want to talk a little bit more now about you know, playing fighting games and more about competing in them. And so, you know, just wanted to go ahead and start with you, Roy. You are one of the few players that I've had the privilege of talking to that were at some of the earliest fighting game competitions in history. How did you learn about competitions or tournaments? Like, what were some of the earliest tournaments you remember seeing? Like, what was that experience for you, if you could take us back?
Well, absolutely. This is going back to the Shoryuken forum days. Okay. And that's basically how I found out about B5. And B4 was obviously the tournament before B5. And these tournaments are what is what is known to Evo today. Okay. Because back in those days, they were called like, battle at the bay, you know, so to say. B5 back in 2001, which was held in the Folsom Game Room, was my first major tournament, and that place was not very big. The amount of players that showed up to that tournament is a lot less to what you see today. I mean, today you'll see like the MGM Grand Mandalay Bay just filled the seats, you know, and watching, you know, the top 8 finals. But back in 2001 when B5 was going on, everything was still ran in our arcade cabinets, which I absolutely miss that format, mind you. But still, I mean, the significant amount of players that we had back then was a lot less, but we were still packed in that arcade like sardines, because back in those days, it was a packed house. So there would be people that you walk by that had like a bad case of like bad breath or like BO, that kind of thing. So it got a little annoying at times, but in B5, unfortunately, they didn't have a Third Strike tournament. And also back in those days, North America wasn't really up to speed on Third Strike like the Japanese were going on their pace. So the interest back then for Third Strike was a lot less. So back in that day, the tournaments that were ran at B5 were Marvel 2, CVS 1, ST, and Alpha 3. And the only games that I entered were CVS and Marvel 1, because those are the games or actually CVS, Marvel 1, and ST. I did enter ST. But ST, I kind of just entered it for fun back in that day, because I was really green. I was really much a beginner in that game. But there's a video on YouTube that I uploaded not long ago between me and David Spence, who was a really good old school Dawson player back in the day, and he placed top 16 in that tournament. As far as Third Strike goes, I will point out, however, there were some casuals going on, and Japanese players showed up for this tournament. Okay, there was Boss, there was Liquid Metal, Chikio Sodom was there, Cooney was there, and I think there was another Japanese player, but he was actually a Marvel 2 player. He went by the name of White. Those are the 5 players that I can recall who showed up. I know there was a couple others, but I can't really remember who they were. But I do remember when they had casual Third Strike going on, Liquid Metal was freaking just wiping the floor with everybody with Necro. And Necro was a character that North America was very unfamiliar with. They thought that character sucked. It was just amazing, what Liquid Metal was able to do with this character. But it wasn't until when B4 and B5 turned into Evo when Third Strike really took off, and that was in 2002. And I attended that tournament as well. Again, they didn't have a Third Strike tournament, for everybody, but they did have a 5-on-5 Japan versus USA exhibition. The person who was filming that, I was standing right next to it. It was me, Too Tall, Jeff Arnold, my buddy, was there also, and I believe Dan Light was there also, and I want to say Scott showed up, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I can't really remember remember if he was there or not. But all I remember was, just standing there and watching this happen, and I'm all like, "This is Third Strike. This is the way it was meant to be played." I was just in utter awe, as like everybody else was, with that crowd going wild, with those Aegis Reflex setups going on that Tokido was doing. And I don't think Tokido played Third Strike seriously back then, to be honest with you. But just for the Japanese players to come down and showcase, what they can do in that game. Evolution 2002 was when Third Strike in North America took off, based on what I saw that night.
Honestly, I didn't really start going to tournaments until later. I'm probably like real late. Like I was just a casual player, online warrior, I guess you could say. Probably to like 2000, I want to say 2015. I would play a lot of like Roy mentioned earlier. I would play a lot of 15th anniversary on the Xbox back in like 03, 04, which is a horrible online experience, but that's all we had at the time. Then I think it was GGPO came out. I played on that, which wasn't great, but it was online. It's all we had.
Hi, Lara.
And then actually it was 2DF before that, which I don't think I played a lot of that. But when GGPO got released, I played a ton of Third Strike. That's when I started to like get the feel of the game, learn the game. And then what was it, like 2011 online edition came out. And that's where I just spent most of my time. I played that game probably every single day. After work, after school, I would just play Third Strike. I don't think I played any other game at the time. But as far as competing goes, I think I went because there wasn't a Jazzy circuit back then, and there wasn't really Third Strike tournaments going on around in Arizona at the time. So I went to Evo when Street Fighter V came out, and I think that was like my first big major tournament. And then I kind of just went from there. I wasn't good at Street Fighter V. I played till like season 2. I just played it because that was the game being played at the time. And then once I found out that you started doing the Jazzy circuit stuff, and seeing how Third Strike was coming back to life, because for a while there, like when online editions started to like wither away, like I don't feel like anybody was really playing Third Strike. I mean, I wasn't even playing it because the player base was going down. Fightcade was terrible. GGPO was terrible, so it was just hard to get a good online experience, and there wasn't really any tournaments going on at the time. So I just kind of played what was available, and at that time it was Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. When you started doing the Jazzy circuit, and especially when 5K2 got released, that's when I really started to grind Third Strike. Switched to a whole bunch of different characters. I started out as Alex, then I went Ryu, Urian, Ken. I've done the whole cast, and then Necro kind of stuck out to me a lot because I watched a Pino AB7 compilation video on YouTube, and I was seeing all the juggles that he was doing and the hype that he was getting. I was like, that is the sickest juggle I've ever seen. I want to try that. And then I just kind of went from there and just had Necro as my main. Like, I didn't want to change any characters. I've been with Necro ever since. Yeah, like, unfortunately, I don't have the history that Roy has when it comes to tournaments. I mean, he's been around way longer than I have. Yeah, I want to do as many more Third Strike tournaments as I can until the game stops being played, which doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon.
So after listening to both of your histories in the fighting games, it seems like, Roy, you were really active during, I guess we could call the golden age of the FGC, when there were so many tournaments going on, both at the local level and then, of course, the Battle of the Bay tournaments, which eventually became Evo. You had regionals starting to pop up. So, like, you grew up in an era where, like, you played a lot of games, and, you know, when you were talking about how Dan kind of gravitated toward Third Strike, did you, like, find that, like, surprising at all? Or, like, because you played a lot of games. You played all sorts of different games. Like, what do you think it is about Third Strike, like, as far as why kind of Dan gravitated towards that game in particular?
I've said it once, and I'll say it again. I've said it 1,000 times. The parry system is what fascinated him. And it's the parry system in Third Strike is what sets apart. It sets Third Strike apart from a lot of fighting games. Because having the parry system, with that being part of the game, you can never assume the game is over when somebody's down to a pixel of life. And Daigo is a sure proof why that is in that game, against Justin when he parried that entire Chun Super back in 2004. But yeah, just having, the parry system and then punishing after that. I noticed, how he played back when he first started. He loved to parry. He almost never blocked. I mean, he always loved to counter and punish you and go completely on the offensive, which is kind of like, how my style is. I like to rush down and that kind of stuff, be in your face. He just seemed to adapt very well, because obviously in the lag, that he was playing in on the OG Xbox, with the setup that we had back then, he would always, nail it. He just got used to the timing or something. He was really well adjusted. He was able to adapt.
I played a lot of online back then. Input lag. I mean, I was so used to it that it didn't bother me at all. Like, to me, 10, 20 frames of lag, like, that was nothing. It didn't bother me. I'll adjust to it as much as I can. Even like before Third Strike, I would play on, I don't know if you remember it, it was Kylera on AIM 32K. That was absolute garbage, but I played it. I adjusted to it. I was so good at it that, like, when I would go to another laggy ass netcode, I'm like, this ain't that bad. It can't be worse than Kylera. So it was really easy to adjust to different netcodes. And as time went on, netcode got really, really, really good. And that's much better than what we had back in the early 2000s.
Now let me mention, that's funny how you mentioned Kylera. We had to use IRC to get matches going. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Daniel was on like the tail end on when IRC was used. But yeah, that's that's what we had to use, to get matches. We would have to direct chat with somebody and ask them if they wanted to play, and then directly connect to them via peer-to-peer. That was really funny, the method that we used back then. So
when online first came out, like, what was the appeal of online for me? I could stay home and play these games. You were still young, right, Dan? So, like, what was kind of, why do you think you started kind of playing online a lot?
Well, when I started playing, like, the fighting, it was already the dark ages. Like, nobody was playing fighting games. I think the latest fighting game that came out was Capcom Fighting Jam. That's what it was. That was the last Capcom game that came out, and there's no scene for me to play. So I would find other ways to play other people, and that at the time it was Kylura, MAME32K. I would play a lot of X-Men versus Street Fighter on that. I got actually really good at that game. I played it religiously for like 2-3 years. And then I think other platforms started coming out and more players started playing. And to me, yeah, you could go to the arcade and play the same people over and over and over again, because, I mean, the scene was pretty small back then. Or you can go online and play people all over the United States. Like, you have a bigger player base, and you get more knowledge from all these other players that you're playing, and not just the same 4 or 5 people that you're playing locally. I mean, I would play offline when I could, when it was available, but I didn't have that luxury. Like, when I started getting into it, like I said, things were starting to go downhill for the FGC. So online was all I had.
Dan, earlier I asked Roy why he thought Third Strike became your main game. I realized I should probably ask you that, right? Like, why do you think is Third Strike was kind of the game for you?
Like he said, it was the parry system. No other game had it. I mean, CVS2 had the Just Defend, but it's not the same. The parry system in Third Strike is pretty much like you land the parry, you're most definitely going to get the punish from that parry. Watching the Evolution 2002 video really inspired me to learn the game more, because like he said, watching that Urian demolish Justin, or Taquito demolishing Justin Wong with those unblockables that we've never seen before, and how hyped the crowd was getting, that was inspiring. And then obviously the Daigo parry really interested me even further into the game. Having that parry system compared to like Super Turbo, where there's checkmate moments, like there's nothing you can do. This guy's gonna throw a Hadouken and you're dead. Whereas the parry system comes in, like, yeah, you have that one little pixel of life, but that doesn't mean you're gonna be dead. If you guess right on the parry, I mean, you can get a full punish and potentially win with a comeback. And not very many games had that mechanic, at least not like Third Strike.
Like you said, you had been playing online a lot. So why did you start kind of playing offline or competing offline?
Some internet trolls saying that I was an online warrior and I didn't have what it takes. I don't really remember. I don't remember who it was, but I saw some people talking shit that, oh, he's just an online warrior, he can't play. That's when I was like, okay, well, motherfucker, I'm going to show you that I can play. So then I started coming out and, getting top 8, pretty consistently. And, it just motivated me to keep going with it. Anytime we have the Jazzy rankings or the Jazzy circuit or any tournament in general for Third Strike, I'm going to be there. I want to start traveling more. For bigger Third Strike tournaments, like the Jazzy finale in Colorado. I'm going to try to go to that one, compete in that, hopefully get in the top 30, top 16 bracket, maybe. Who knows? Anything's possible. It'd be nice to have a Necro up in the top 16, right?
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about the Arizona Third Strike scene, or I guess we could talk about the Arizona FGC in general. Tell us a little bit about how the fighting game scene developed over in Arizona.
Growing up in Gilbert, not everybody knows this. Obviously, Daniel knows, because this guy would used to come over to our house and play every once in a while. But me and Tutal went to high school together. Okay, and Tutal he's obviously known as the OG Necro. It was basically me and him and a few other guys who used to hit up the Mesa Golfland off of the Freeway 60 and Country Club Drive. But yeah, Golfland was definitely our hotspot back in those days. We're talking early 2000s when Marvel 2 just hit the arcades and was completely hot. That was basically when we started playing competitively in fighting games in general. So Marvel 2 was a lot of our gateway into getting into competitive fighting games, and creating the Arizona FGC in general. So yeah, we would obviously hit that place up a lot, to play some Marvel 2, and then obviously CVS 1 came out. That was a new game, during that time. That came out shortly after Marvel, so everybody started jumping on that. But Golfland was also the arcade that would run tournaments back in those days, and there were a few of them that were featured in Tips and Tricks magazine, because Jeff Arnold, who was living in Mesa at the time, was an editor for that magazine. So he worked with Jason Wilson, with the publishing of that magazine every month. He would also do like strategy guides and all that stuff on that mag. And I definitely have to say I've gotten the privilege to be over at his place and watch him work on a few of those games. One of them being Dave Mera BMX2. That was one of my favorites that I got to witness him do. But yeah, during that time, Golfland, Marvel 2, CVS 1. Golfland did have Third Strike, I should mention, but the thing that I should point out was the Third Strike that they had, it was a dead cart, so it was suicided, and back then there was no Darksoft, so there was nothing we can do about it except send it to Capcom to get the battery changed out. But Carl, who was the game tech for Golfland at the time, didn't even bother sending the cart to get it fixed, because obviously back in those days there wasn't a whole lot of interest in Third Strike. It wasn't getting a lot of play. But the thing that baffled me the most was he ran New Generation on his arcade floor on a full set of Sims, because it was the same CPS3 board that Third Strike was on. So, but yeah, Golfland was definitely our arcade hotspot back then in my area, because Mesa isn't that far from Gilbert. It's just a beeline on the 60 freeway down to Country Club, and you see the castle on the side of the freeway. That's the Golfland arcade, So, but it was definitely, I think that arcade was definitely a focal point in getting the FGC formed in our area. Anyways, we were actually kind of spread out, because obviously there was Metro Center Mall back where Saber Scott, that's where he originated from, was the Metro Center Mall. And there was also Desert Sky Mall, which was all the way out on the west side. There was a lot of Marvel players, really, really good ones, who came out from that area as well. So we were actually really all spread out. And there would also be times, where I would make the drive to Metro Center or Desert Sky, because I like to get a variety of players back in those days. I just didn't want to, play the same people over and over and over again at Golfland all the time. I want that variety of like knowledge, playing different people at various arcades. So yeah, that's basically what I did back then. Just mainly, those three places, going from Golfland to Metro Center. Oh, and I forgot to mention Castles and Coasters. That was another place that we went to, and that was a place that actually had Third Strike. And then obviously Desert Sky. So I should say those four places, but obviously Golfland was the closest to me. To play at those other arcades, I had to make the drive out to Phoenix, so which I actually had no problem doing. I was down to do anything back then, being only like 18, 19 years old. So, as a lot of us were.
It seems like there were a lot of places for you to play Third Strike, but like you said, the interest didn't seem to be too high. So how did Third Strike kind of start gaining a little bit of momentum? Just for me personally, it wasn't really until like Devastation that I started hearing about Third Strike in Arizona.
Yeah, it was definitely around during that time frame. But the first major Third Strike tournament that we had was in '06. And it was at Castles and Coasters. And it was a really big tournament. It was a big deal. Now, it wasn't just Third Strike. It was a variety of fighters, because it was Third Strike, it was CBS 2, it was Tekken 5, and there was also Marvel 2 and ST. I'm pretty sure it was those 5 games. But obviously, Third Strike was my main interest at the time. And a lot lot of from out of town showed up for that tournament, from SoCal, from Vegas, basically West Coast players. I remember Vaya and Watson were there. They were the guys who were the finalists in Third Strike. And there's a video on YouTube on those grand finals. Don Snedon came down. Ghetto D. Love that guy. Also, some Vegas crew came down. Danny Leong was there. Peter Sue came down. And there was a handful of other SoCal guys who came down too. I remember a guy who went by the name of Phobos. And another Vegas guy he went by the name of Wes. But those are like some of the names, that I remember from back then. I didn't do too shabby in that tournament. I was using Ken. Ken was basically my mainstream character back then. I did play a little bit of Alex because I had knowledge from him also. But I didn't get into my mainstream of characters, which is obviously Yun and Yang, until it was Evo that same year, Evo 2006. The only disappointment from that tournament was it was played on PS2, and I wasn't really, fond of playing tournament on console back then, because I was really used to the arcade setup, the CPS3s, because those were the past 2 major tournaments that I had, were Evo 2002 and B5. So I didn't get back into Evo again until '06, so there was kind of like a gap there. 4 years in between, and not attending any majors. But a good experience, from '06 was playing Nuki and Nitto casually, and getting the shit beat out of me, by those guys. Obviously, Japanese players, they're light years ahead of us when it comes to Third Strike, but we're starting to, to creep up on them a bit, I feel, and now that, a lot more players are attending Co-op Cup, to gain the experience and all that stuff, so they have that to fall back on, to up their level. So, but yeah, '06 was basically, I think, my takeoff year, when it comes, to Third Strike, because obviously that's what I started playing the Twins, and that was basically my as far as like Third Strike, and I'd say like video games in general, where I really started, to get more interested, as far as Third Strike goes.
When I think back on when we were playing Third Strike in our younger days, there was so much hate for Yun. We thought that character was so cheap. And for the record, the character is cheap. The character is very OP, especially at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
And your execution is on point, and you almost never mess up. And you just are a master at meter management, and everything is just precisely calculated so that you can reduce that amount of time. Like when I think about playing Yun, I always think about like 3 Yuns. The first Yun is the Yun that is building meter.
Mm-hmm.
Like your Yun game has to be on point for there. Then there's obviously what you do with that meter. That's the Yun in Ganasian. But then there's the third Yun. Like after you finish the Ganasian, like how are you going to respond in that situation, right? When you finish the Ganasian, are you going to go for a set play? Are you going to be aggressive? Are you going to hang back and just build meter? And so like when I think about like a complete Yun player, I think about like those three phases. I guess you could call them phases of the Yun game, right? Like the pre-Ganasian, the Ganasian, and the post-Ganasian.
Well, I think it all depends on what ender you use also, build to gain, what amount of meter. And if you pull off the KO ender, you're in baller status, because you get over half your meter back. And if you're in that situation, I think you stay aggressive, and because you'll have that meter again. And then the next thing you know, you have another activation when they're still in the corner.
Yeah, it's all about trying to reduce that amount of time where you need meter with Yun. It's so simple, and that's kind of what makes him such a deadly character. And because we as American players were just simply not skilled enough to handle the offense, Yun seemed like such an insurmountable task back in those days. And I remember very vividly a lot of animosity towards this character. A lot of people really hated Yun, and
there was a time where I would play online and someone would pick Yun, I would just drop out the game. I'm like, I'm not gonna play this. 04, 05, like I was like, I don't want to play this. This isn't gonna be fun.
Yeah, it's so like when you think about how we remember certain moments in FGC history, I think about the Daigo Perry evolution in 2004. Everyone talks about Justin and Daigo, but what they don't talk about is KO and how no one could touch him that entire weekend. No one could even beat him in the Family Fun tournament that they ran before Evo, because Evo 2004 was run on Super Guns, and Family was like, well, have all these Japanese players coming out, it would be a shame if we couldn't get them to play on actual arcade hardware. And so they ran a tournament the day before Evo. Sugiyama actually came in second in that tournament. He beat Daigo, but he couldn't beat KO because no one was beating KO that weekend. It just didn't seem like KO was beatable. And it's so funny because when we think about Evo 2004, all we talk about is the Daigo Perry. But we have to remember, especially for those that were there, like just how dominant KO was. And Daigo was doing some sick shit, and KO was like just brushing everything off. So yeah, when I think about Evo 2004, no one was beating KO. No one came close. And yeah, it's just crazy to think about how that's changed. I think as American players have gotten more skilled, we have a little easier time handling some of Yun's offense. But then the Yun has to evolve now too, right? Like if you play a Yun that can do Daipon loop and not F up, you only need like 2 touches, especially in certain matchups. So yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about that, like with regards to Necro, Dan, because like your brother has made Yun and then switching to Yang, both very strong characters. And so like, yeah, what like attracted you to Necro, like the character specifically?
I honestly I don't like going to top tier characters. I get more satisfaction of winning sets with a low tier character or mid tier character. Like when you guys were talking about Chun-Li, like, and how much work really doesn't need to be like pushed in Chun-Li. Like I could play Chun-Li and win games, but like I'll win the game and like I don't get anything out of it. Like all I do is just whiff normals and then wait for the hit confirm, and then once I get that, it's just rinse and repeat. Whereas Necro, you have to earn your wins. Like you can't really turtle with Necro. I guess you can with some characters, but like his long range limbs like don't work all that well. Especially against characters like Chun-Li. Like you can whiff a normal and then on hit they can punish you. And I don't know, it's just something like I get that great satisfaction when I be, especially like a top tier character like Chun-Li or Ken or even Yun. If I win that set, I feel real good, and like I don't, like I said, I don't get that with top tier characters. So to put in the work like that and to get wins, like people notice that. If you're just a Ken, just racking up all these wins, everyone's just gonna be like, oh, well, he's just a Ken. Who cares? Everybody plays that character. But when you're a Necro player or any other low tier character and you're getting top 8, people tend to look at that and notice it and remember you. So that's why I pick Necro, for that reason.
That sounds really similar to sort of why I picked up Necro. I started out as a Ken main, and then when I started going to family, I noticed there were Ken mains everywhere, and the only reason I settled with Necro was I saw Paulie, top Ken player from SoCal, use him one time. But then like I noticed that family, no one used Necro. So like it wasn't even like, I don't even know if I had any like understanding of tiers. I just distinctly remember my motivation for maining Necro. It was like no one uses him here. It was really like, how could I find a way to get more reps with the top players in the arcade? That was by and large my motivation for maining Necro. One thing that I always say is choosing Necro kind of almost forced me to learn how to play the game correctly, or like to understand what fighting games are about. I was definitely a button masher. Well, I mean, I still mash buttons, but
everyone starts out as a masher. So.
Yeah. But sometimes they don't. You have those prodigies, Justin, Ricky, Daigo, players that just get it right away. And then there are players that have to like learn, and then eventually they'll get it. Yeah, I think picking Necro kind of forced me to like understand how to play the game. Like maybe in a way that maybe I would never have gotten with Ken, because like with Ken, I was just, low forward super, strong fierce, fireball super, jump in. I could just do things.
Pilot, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, with Necro, like, I never had corner pressure, and that's what Necro's all about. So I learned a lot doing corner pressure, shimmy. Like, I never shimmied before I played Necro. I didn't even know what doing a shimmy was. Hit confirms, I learned that. All my, like, high-level third strike knowledge happened with Necro, just because... I mean, in order to play Necro at a high level, you have to learn that kind of knowledge. So, yeah, when I switched to Necro, I feel like that's when I started to really up my game with third strike.
And you noticed that, Roy, when Dan picked up Necro?
Yeah. He as soon as he picked up Necro and started playing, him more and more and more, and just to the point, where he's really knowledgeable with that character, I find it to be in a very annoying matchup. So that's why when I'm playing against him, I'm just like, all right, do I want to go to Yoon or do I play Yang? Honestly, I'm more comfortable with Yang in that matchup for some odd reason, but
I could tell you why I think you might be. Because to me, the difference between Yun versus Necro and Yun versus Yang is really night and day. It's, to me, at the highest level, like, Yun has to turtle. Yun has really good tools to keep Necro out just long enough to build meter and get Asian. And then just like you said before, Dan, rinse and repeat. With Yang, you have to pressure. So it's kind of interesting when I think about those two matchups. I think like at the highest of levels, I think the Yun Necro match is Yun basically turtling until Yun gets Ganesian, and Yang has to be in that pocket. He has to consistently close the distance on Necro, because Necro is a pretty slow character. So I definitely think it's a different experience playing the two characters. But you know, what do you prefer, Dan? Like, do you prefer playing Yang or do you prefer playing Yun?
Between the twins, I'd rather
Yeah.
play against Yang. I don't know, something about getting hit by Ganasian just makes me mad, and it starts to tilt me. Because you can juggle Necro easy,
Yeah.
Ganasian, and if he hits you with that ender where he gets damn near half his meter back, and then 2 seconds later he has another one, like it just makes me even more mad. And then like the tilt level just keeps going up, and I lose a lot against him. Whereas Yang, like you're saying, I know he's gonna want to pressure me and not just try to run away and turtle and build meter. So I'm ready for that, and I don't know. To me, it's just an easier matchup. Whereas Yun, I get too frustrated with it, especially a very good Yun player that knows what they're doing, like Roy, for example. Like, I'm glad he picks Yang. I'd rather play against that than his Yun, because his Yun, if he lands Ganasian, I'm just gonna throw my hands up, and then the match gets destroyed.
Yeah, it's like the damage output is so high. Like,
Very
especially if the Yun knows the most optimal combos.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's something demoralizing about seeing your life just melt, while your opponent is.
Especially when like you feel like you got this in the bag. You're like, they got like maybe 30% health left, and then they get that 1-2-3 into Ganasian, and then there goes your life, half your life gone, just like that.
Yeah, but like you were saying, Roy, right? Like, you prefer Yang versus Necro, but Dan prefers Yun. So like,
well, now he knows. Like, strategy.
So what do you find about like the Yun versus Necro matchup? Like, what do you think about that matchup?
I mean, I've been playing Yun for so long, before I started playing Yang. So Daniel kind of picks up on what I want to do, with Yun, because I like to be aggressive with Yun rather than just like turtle. But obviously, yeah, I want to build meter. I kind of gone into the habit of doing that more, whenever I use Yun. But the thing that I think Daniel hates the most is if you catch Necro with Yun doing the 1-2-3 activate. The thing with Necro is his hitbox. He's really, really easy to die pawn loop. So if Dan gets hit with that, when he's playing Necro, obviously he's going to be taking big damage. So that's probably what he's pointing out to when he throws his hands up in the air. Is just because normally when I land that, I can get the whole screen on him. Especially if he's playing Necro against a Yun.
Dan, what's your sort of approach to like the Necro Yang matchup? Because you play your brother, and so going to assume that you had a lot of reps, and so like what's kind of like your, like, if a player came up to you and went, "Hey, like, what do I do in this matchup?"
It depends on what kind of player it is. I try to bait low forward into EX flashes and parry the entire thing. Roy loves to do that too, so I'll try to bait that. A lot of Yang players love to do that, but then there's some Yang players that don't do that at all. They'll do like this weird style, and I just don't know how to play against it, and I'll get tilted. Sometimes just random people on Fightcade will do that, and I don't know. Sometimes I just don't know how to play against a very good Yang that just doesn't play the normal style that I'm used to. Because normally Yangs are very aggressive. They'll do the EX slashes and the command grab into more EX slashes, just trying to build that stun meter. But some of them don't do that. Some of them pick SA3, which I think is trash. But when they hit you on that, you're like, all right, is this gonna end like eventually? This super? But yeah, I don't know. It depends on the player. Sometimes I just don't know what to do against a Yang player that just plays weird.
So like you play somebody for the first time, and so have you noticed that you do certain things consistently against Yang players? Like, say a random Yang player challenges you on Fightcade. The round starts. Like, what are you usually looking for, or what is your mindset when that game starts?
What I'm trying to do is put him in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I shine the most, is corner pressure. So I try to either backdash into the corner and then wait for my opportunity to back throw him and then push him in the corner and then kind of go from there, with confirming into Electric Snake or throwing into resets. That's what I try to do. If that doesn't work out, I kind of just wait for them to throw out that low forward and parry it and then go into crouching short into super, and hopefully that hits. But yeah, normally with the Yang players, I try to go with the corner pressure. If that doesn't work, it usually doesn't work out for me.
Well, if the two of you are able to make it to the Jazzy finale weekend at Aki, I would love to see a Necro versus Yang, brother versus brother concept match. I think
there's been a few occasions where we ran into each other on tournament, and I think Daniel has the upper hand by one set. So
okay, well then you can tie it up at the finale. So I want to talk a little bit about the current AZ scene. Roy, you had touched on how there are quite a few players from California specifically that now live in AZ. And so how would you guys talk about, how the Third Strike scene is now in 2023?
Compared to what it was before, and it's grown so much. A lot of new players jumping in. We just got the AZ Discord for Third Strike going a couple years ago. New people coming out every tournament. Faces I've never seen before, just trying to learn the game. Some of them don't stick around, some of them do. But yeah, it used to just be like the same 5-6 people every time, but now we're getting like consistent, like 15, 20 people, sometimes 30. It's amazing how far this game is continuing to go. So a lot of young people too. The youngest guy that we have showing up I think he's 20. How old is he? I think he's 21 now.
People who are younger than the game.
Mm-hmm. Like Z's dad was playing Third Strike. That's how he got into it. So yeah, it's amazing on how much this scene is growing.
And so, what do you guys think is behind the appeal of Third Strike, especially when it comes to these younger players?
The thing that I think, as far as like Third Strike goes, what appeals, to these younger generations, again, I mean, I think they just like, how the game looks. And there's also, I'll say again, the parry mechanic. Obviously, they find, that particular mechanic, to be unique in its own way. Third Strike now these days, it's strictly played on arcade. Especially what me and Daniel are doing, because we have the boards and the cabinets to provide, for these tournaments. It gets them to come out, and interact with players from different generations in this game, and also the social aspect of it. The fact that it's on arcade, it definitely brings back a lot of nostalgia for a lot of us older players, because who grew up in the arcades. So I absolutely love contributing to something like this, to keep this game going. But I think a lot of the other appeal that that I can add to that, to these younger players is the fact that we're handing down our experiences over to them, so they can experience the way we have back in the arcade days.
Yeah, and to add on to that, where we play TGZ, we have that versus city with Third Strike, right? And they have other tournaments there for like Tekken and all these other games. Smash players go over there to do their tournaments, and they'll see the game playing, and they'll see us on there, and they'll be like, well, what's this game? And then we tell them to get on the cabinet and find out, and then some of them just continue to play it after that. Just that one little interaction with the game, and yeah, it's amazing.
as far as the competitive scene goes, you were talking, Roy, about how this game, at least competitively in our scene, the standard is arcade hardware. Like, what do you think about, sort of the future of competitive Third Strike? Where would you like it to go? Where do you think it'll go?
I would definitely think, and I don't think I'm that far off. I just think competitive Third Strike is just going to keep going on the up on up, especially seeing more younger and younger generations getting into this game. And the reason why I say that is because and this falls back on Rennick when he first moved out to Arizona. I remember watching your podcast on him, and he looked like he was pretty disappointed that there wasn't really much of a Third Strike scene out here. Little did he know, he at the time he didn't meet me or my brother yet. So it wasn't until then where we started getting together at TGZ, and then Daniel started buying cabs, and then I bought my cabs, and then we got all our CPS3 boards together. Right now, between me and Daniel, we have 6 CPS3s. I think Daniel sold 2 of them. One of them he sold to Ryan Bracamont and some other guy. So he had like 8 of them at one point. So
yeah. Just to throw it out there, I want to give a shout out to my wife for putting up with this, to allowing me to have 5 cabinets in the house, because I don't feel like there's a lot of wives out there that would put up with that many cabinets and the amount of money that it costs to buy these cabinets. But yeah, shout out to her for being very supportive with that.
And shout out to my fiance as well, allowing me to get these set up. This new game room that I got put together, in the house. And mind you, she's not into Street Fighter or video games in general, but she is actually ecstatic that I got this put together because her 7-year-old is absolutely in love with this room. But yeah, definitely, I want to give a shout out to my fiance as well, for allowing me to have this together.
So let's talk about some players in the AZ scene. If the Cactus League had to put together a Team Arizona for Coop, well, who would be on that team?
Big Game James, Rennick, myself, Roy, and Ray, because Ray's the hype man. We need him on our team.
Ray is the energy.
Yes, he is absolutely that. We need him. All we got to do is bring him Tecate Light, and we're good.
How about you, Roy? Who is your team? And any 5 players, past, present, future, i.e., upcoming players, Team Arizona.
I have to go with the same 5 players that Daniel just mentioned. And it's funny how he mentions Ray. We have to have Ray on the team because he's the hype man. I love hearing him when he talks a lot of shit. It's funny. Having Ray as our 5th man, I have to agree with him on that one.
So who would you use though, Roy? Yun or Yang?
I have to stick with my guns here. It's going to be Yang.
Okay. What if there could be like a team, like an AZ team, like a junior varsity team? Who would be on that junior varsity team? Like if the team that you just described is varsity, and you guys could send a junior varsity, a JV team, who would use? Who would be on that team?
Yeah, definitely. I would go with Jamie, who is Ariana Grande. She's definitely coming on the up and up, with her Chun-Li game. And my second one would be Moria, who is the Dudley player. He's really solid, with that character. I think Jizz is getting up there, with his Urian game. He's starting to get more consistent in his Aegis setups. So I actually like where he's going with his game. So I definitely have to pick him. There's another Chun-Li player, BMxer. I would I'd have to throw him on that team also. So that's 4. And the final one, who I think I'd throw on there, man, this is a tough one. You know what? I'd have to give it to Alonso, who's another pretty solid Dudley player, and plus he's actually been to Japan not too long ago, so he actually got that Koenji Cube experience. So yeah, I'd definitely go with those 5 that I just listed right there. So
BlinG, what is your Team AZ JV team?
JV team, I'm gonna go with Farhad, because he just recently switched to Chun-Li and he's getting better and better every single day. Tristan, aka DJ Faka, another Necro player. Moria, a very good Dudley player that recently just moved out here. I'll also go with Ariana Grande for her amazing Chun play. And the 5th one, I think I'm gonna go with Jizza Effects, aka Jalen. He's really starting to get much better with his Urian. His Urian's getting from when I first played him to now, like it's night and day. Like his Urian was so basic when he first started. He didn't know like any of the setups, didn't know charge partitioning, and I just recently played him not too long ago, and he's got charge partitions. He knows setups. He's playing high ranked players and IK, trying to level up his game every day. I got to give him a spot.
I wanted to talk about the whole cab collecting thing. You know, just to be clear, you guys don't just collect these cabs just to have them. You have in the past opened up your houses to players in your scene to help grow your community and to help these players get better. But like, where did this kind of start?
Well, for me, it was a Street Fighter 2 wooden cabinet that was given to me by my father-in-law. I think it was a conversion cabinet. I think the original cabinet was a Capcom Mercs cabinet that was converted into Street Fighter 2, which was then converted into a MAME cabinet. So I got it when it was a MAME cabinet, and it didn't work when I got it, so I kind of had to build it from not from ground up. I mean, the base was there, but I had to like rebuild all the inner wiring, do all that. And once I finally got it working, I just got addicted to it. Like I just wanted to keep, building it from like a piece of shit to, an actual usable cabinet that, you can provide to the community. So once that cabinet got done, I wanted another one, but I wanted like an authentic, candy cabinet. So I wanted to try and get one locally. Didn't work out. Nobody has those here locally, and if they were available, they weren't for sale. So I had to go to LA. There's a guy in LA that goes by KC that just has a warehouse just full of candy cabinets. It is more than just cabinets. He has like all types of imported cabinets from Japan, to the point where it's just hoarding. It looks like a giant hoarding episode. Like he has so much stuff in there that you literally have to go through like this Indiana Jones trail to find the cabinet that you're looking for, and then spend like 2 hours to pull it out of his warehouse and then purchase it from him. So I was communicating with him back and forth for like a couple weeks, and then I finally pulled the trigger. I was gonna get an Aero City, which is an all metal cabinet. But for whatever reason it didn't work out, and I wanted to come home with something. So he's like, "Oh, I have this cabinet over here, which was a Sega New Net City, and it was wired for JAMA, because normally those are JVS cabinets." So I decided to go with that because the monitor looked very nice. So we come home with that. I had to rewire the whole thing because the JAMA harness it worked kind of, but it didn't work very well. So I had to redo that. Once I got all that going, put Third Strike on it. And just the monitor was amazing on that cabinet. And then once I got that all set up, I was like, I kind of want to have a head-to-head setup. So then I get and start talking with KC again, and I buy another one, get a head-to-head setup. But I think this time was a Blast City, which I think I still have. I think it's the one right behind me, the far left. That's the first Blast City that I bought from him. Same thing. Once I finished it, I want another one. And then I originally sold my new Net Cities that I got from him. I sold those and got 2 more Blast Cities. And then that's what made that wall right there. And then PCB started stacking up. I started buying more and more of that. Prices started going up, so I wasn't buying as many arcade parts as I used to. And then recently I got the Vulex C, which was a Street Fighter 4 cabinet. Originally a Street Fighter 4 cabinet. And then I have the Street Fighter, what is it, the arcade edition artwork on it. But I use that one for 5K. So I just like get a DisplayPort cable, go from the monitor straight to the computer, and then I just use that for 5K and all my newer fighting games on that one. But yeah, I can't fit any more cabinets in this house, so I think I'm kind of stuck with what I got right now, unless I sell one, which I don't think is going to happen.
How about you, Roy? How did this cab collecting thing start for you? I know you have 2. Are those new Astros or just regular Astros?
Regular Astros, yeah. But yeah, as soon as Daniel started getting his cabinets, I kind of followed through, with myself to get a head-to-head setup. So we went through the same guy, KC, out in LA, and he also had a new warehouse, that he moved to kind of hold more of his stuff, bigger space. But so we drove out there, picked up these 2 Astro Cities, and they obviously were yellowed, reeked of nicotine smoke, stained, from the cigarette smoke, from the Japanese arcade that they were sitting in for all those years. Yeah, brought these 2 home, and the first thing I did was wipe the cabinets down, to get the staining off of them with 2 bottles of Simple Green, the spray. Luckily I didn't have to repaint anything. It's as soon as I was able to wipe that down, I started getting more of the white color, but had to replace the fluorescent lights for the marquees, replaced the control panels, sticks and buttons. The wiring, luckily, I didn't have to touch. That was all still intact. And I got the marquees on the top of them, just to spice up the cabinets a little bit, to get more appeal. But one thing that was a really pain in the ass was one of the cabinets, and I think it was the 2-player the cabinet that I used, for the 2-player side. The chassis took a dump on it, so the monitor wasn't working. There was no high voltage going through the chassis, so I had Dan help me out with that, and we pretty much determined, that this chassis is fucked. We got to get rid of it and get a new one, and it was a Nanao MS8 chassis, and we upgraded it to an MS9 chassis, which I thought was the right move, because it's an upgrade over the MS8. But we threw that in there, and it worked since then. It still works to this day. Although it does need a recap kit. We need to do that at some point. But ever since we put that in there, it's been night and day, and they've been running strong to this day. So,
but just to throw out there, like people that want to get into arcade cabinets, like a lot of work goes into this. We don't just buy these and then they just work. Like we put hours and hours of work into getting these things to where they are right now. You gotta clean them, you gotta service the monitor, you gotta rewire them, recap power supplies. Like a lot of work goes into that because people think that they could just buy these, take it home, and then just start playing on it right away. Like unless you buy it from a collector that's already done all the work for you, like it's you got to know what you're doing with these cabinets. And I try to tell that to everybody that asks me about cabinets, and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, because they'll buy the cabinet and then it just sits in their garage because it doesn't work. So I want to give a strong advisement: if you want to buy these, be prepared to fix them because it's going to break eventually.
So originally, I had asked you guys about what you thought about the future of competitive Third Strike, and so what do you think the future holds for the two of you with regards to this game? We'll go ahead and start with you, Dan. I know that you had mentioned that you wanted to try and get out to more events in the future, and so what are some of your, I don't know if you have any like short or long-term goals in Third Strike or things that you definitely want to cross off your Third Strike bucket list, and but what are some of those things?
With this game, like, I'm gonna probably play it till I'm senile. As long as somebody else is playing it, I'm gonna keep playing the game too. I don't really have any long-term goals with the game. I just want people to keep playing it, and keep it alive for as long as we can. And if that means me helping out hosting tournaments and getting the buzz around for the AZ fighting game community, I mean, I'm up to do that. I just love this game, and I hope it sticks around for as long as I'm still on this earth.
What about you, Roy? You've had already a very long career in the FGC, and so as again someone that's probably around the same age as I am, as you look back, what are some of the things that you still want to do moving forward?
Honestly, the same thing that Dan was talking about. I plan on playing Third Strike until my hands don't work anymore. I mean, I just have a passion, for the game, and also I still want to be there, for the community, and have them use my cabinets, for tournaments and our boards, and just to keep the scene alive and going. And then like he was talking about, keeping a buzz on the street about it, and getting some new recruits, because there used to been an event, an arcade pinball convention, that was held in Mesa each year, and we would take all of our cabinets out and just have like a candy cab lane with like Third Strike and various other fighters on our cabinets. And that's actually how we got some of our new recruits, was through that convention. Because you never know, when you take your stuff out, for other people to play, there's people, lurking around, in that event who actually has a love and an interest, for Third Strike. You end up, talking with that person and telling them all about, our scene, and then that's how we get their foot in the door. That way is just by going out, to arcade conventions, like I talked about, and just keeping the buzz on Third Strike, within that event, to get new players going, and then also implementing, like the undammed USB converters into our cabinets, for people, who prefer to use their other controllers. There's been that, to get people in the door also.
Yeah, that's something I never thought I would see, somebody on a hitbox playing Third Strike.
Right.
It's amazing. Shout out to Undammed for making those converters.
After listening to the both of you talk about your history with the FGC and now your love for collecting and providing cabs for your scene, I always find it interesting when I think about like our generation and these cabs. And I think I may have mentioned this outside the podcast, but like cab collecting is, kind of like our generation's muscle cars.
Yeah, like if you join the Arcade Projects forum, which is like mainly cabinets. They do other cabinets too, like American style cabinets, but a lot of people post their projects on there for Astro Cities and Blast Cities. And some of them that you see, you're like, man, I can't believe you bought that hunk of junk. Like that thing's gonna take a lot of work to get it to a functioning state. but they do it. Like they put in like I don't know how much money they put into it, but they put in all the work to get it to pristine collector edition. Like it looks like it came off the assembly line. So if you want to see stuff like that, yeah, arcadeprojects.com. That definitely has a lot of project journeys in there.
Roy, Dan, it's been really great to get to know you a little bit more. Definitely hope we can talk again. Talk more Third Strike, talk more FGC, talk more life. You guys are definitely welcome back on the podcast anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us, man.
Yeah, I mean it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Going back to the history, which dates all the way back, to 2000. Like I mentioned, Marvel 2 was my gateway game into the competitive fighting games. But yeah, I definitely loved talking about the Third Strike history here in our state. Like I said, when Rennick moved here, he was disappointed to see that there was no scene. But then when he met us, that's when it really took off. And then it just basically grew from there. And then obviously we got Big Game James, who's in our team now, and Ray Ramos, Farhad, and and Moria, all these out-of-towner Third Strike players, who are now showing up to Arizona, making us stronger.
So we're going to go ahead and cut it there. But again, appreciate the both of you, BlinG, BMxer, for coming on the Mutant XPerience podcast. And I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone.
Take care, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.